Beautiful day in the Bay Area as we welcome you to Oracle Arena where the Western Conference semifinals begins. Game one, pass inside and a quick bucket, Iguodala to Draymond Green. Quick jumper is good. Draymond Green starting to shoot the ball nicely. Green drives down, scoop layup is good. Green has 8 of their 14 points. Shot clock winding down, Durant got it. Golden State ends the first quarter with 10 straight points. Chris Paul steps back, three-pointer's good. Harden against Draymond Green, step back three is good. Curry, step back three, that's good. Thompson for three. Lead right back up to 6. Curry to pass to Green, throws it up, Iguodala on the flush. Harden, it's good. There's a crowd silencer. Paul sets, fires, and hits. Gordon tries another one. Back-to-back threes, and it's even at 53. Durant gets a running start inside. Here's Durant. Durant drives and finishes. Durant on Harden. Harden for three. Eric Gordon. That's good. Eric Gordon from downtown, and it's tied up again. Harden goes right at Looney, pulls back, knocks down the shot. 29 for Harden. Rockets down 2. 1-footer. That's good. 31 for Kevin Durant.
This is a bad match.
Harden to the basket, lays it up, and banks it home with a foul. High drama here in game one. Curry crossover, three-pointer. Bang!
Curry says nay, nay, no, no. Knocks down the shot. Warriors up 5.
Just over 24 seconds remaining. Harden drives, gets inside, and throws it down. Quick bucket. Durant catches. Chris Paul waiting for the double team. Ball stolen. Paul knocked it away. House picked it up. Here comes Harden. Shot clock off. Harden steps back, puts up a three. Won't go. Rebound goes to Paul. Ball knocked loose, and Gordon was out of bounds when he had it. Golden State ball, and a technical foul. Paul's just been thrown out of the game with 4.4 remaining. That will do it. A pulsating win for Golden State. A heartbreaking loss for Houston there in game one.
An officiating assignment of note for Game 2, Scott Foster will work tonight in Oakland, which is the first time he's been on a Rockets game since February 21st in a loss against the Lakers. James Harden fouled out of that game thanks in part to 4 offensive fouls, and both Chris Paul and Mike D'Antoni received technicals along the way. Afterward, the Rockets could not hide their frustration.
Scott Foster, man, he's I never really talk about officiating or anything like that, but just rude and arrogant. I mean, you aren't able to talk to him throughout the course of a game, and it's like, how do you build that relationship with officials? So, and it's not even that call. Like, it's just, who he is on that floor. It's pretty frustrating. And I mean, and I'm probably gonna get hit, but honestly, I don't really say anything. I'm probably a pretty quiet guy to myself, but it's one of those things where you can't voice your opinion, you can't have a conversation with someone that's officiating the game, and then, you're getting attacked. It's pretty sad.
Chris had similar comments about Foster last year. Do you feel
that's another thing. Last year in the postseason, in the Western Conference Finals, I think he officiated a couple of our games, and it's lingering, and it's something that has to be looked at for sure.
You feel like it's a personal issue?
Yeah, for sure. For sure, it's personal. For sure. Like, I don't think he should be able to even, officiate our games anymore, honestly.
I mean, I don't know what else to do. You know what I mean? Then met with the league with him before and all this stuff. I don't know what else to do.
You feel like there is a person?
I just don't know what else to do. You know what I mean? Just keep playing. I don't know what else to do.
But clearly, Scott Foster is in the Rockets' heads, and whether there's a cause and effect relationship or not, they have lost their last 6 postseason games in which Foster officiated. Somehow, with all-stars all over the place, the referees have become the most talked about people on the floor ahead of Game 2. Ali LaForce is smack dab in the middle of all of that, and she'll work the sidelines tonight on TNT. Ali, with all the chatter about landing zones and Scott Foster, what are the coaches expecting tonight in terms of how the game is administered by the officials?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked me about game strategy and not just the drama of these officials, because that certainly has taken over the series. And it's been really interesting to listen to both teams talk about it at length, because while they both want to put the discussion aside for Game 2 and focus on basketball, it's also so relevant to the strategy that they can't fully put it away. For example, Steve Kerr said, listen, these are two great teams. After Game 1, we need to focus on their narrative of basketball. But then yesterday he walks into the media session and he pretends to bump into a reporter and flop and start laughing, referencing the James Harden flop. Then Houston general manager Daryl Morey sends a tweet out from an article of Steve Kerr years ago questioning the officials. And so the back and forth has been nonstop.
Well,
one thing that is certain is James Harden is not going to stop or do differently anything that he has done in the past. And Coach Kerr said the other day, he said, listen, we've watched how the Bucks have played Houston. We've watched how Utah played Houston, but we're pretty confident in what we've done in the past, and we're not going to change that either. So the wills will collide tonight for Game 2. The officiating will be a huge part of it. I'm sure they've talked at length about how to make that call on the James Harden step back. It's just so difficult because, if he comes forward and the defender also goes towards him, but he sticks his leg out like we saw in that final shot with Draymond on him, that's a no call. And for an official to have to look and see where both players took off, where both of them landed, and if any extremities were thrown out there in the middle of it and make the right call right on the spot is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, whether it's a defensive foul or potentially an offensive foul as well. And I'm going to continue on this path about the officials because, as you know, complaining about the refs between games is a time-honored playoff custom. But there are reports that the Rockets have been working on perceived injustice going back to last year's Western Conference Finals by documenting points lost to bad calls. What's been the Warriors' take on the aggressive tactics coming from Houston's side?
Gosh, that's really tough, and I think that was Daryl Morey's point with the tweet about Steve Kerr, criticizing the official years ago, because now Steve's saying, let's move on from this, and he's trying to point out, well, you complained about them back then when it benefited you, and now you're not. And so it's just a really tricky situation. The Warriors haven't said much specifically about the excuses dating back to last year other than, they're very respectful of Houston. Steve Kerr even said James Harden is the greatest step back three-point shooter ever. And it is tricky. And the Warriors go back and forth on how to defend it too. So I don't think there is necessarily a strong opinion in either direction because they understand the dilemma that's at hand and they understand the points behind it, but they also just think it's not going to change anything. We go out there, we play the game, and no title is ever going to be reversed. No game is going to be reversed because a couple calls were missed here and there. And what I would say to that is simply, if you're Houston and you live or die by the three, well, James Harden is shooting 25% over the last 2 games from the three-point line. And the team has really struggled from 3 so far in the series. And if that's the way you want to live and die, you can't start the game missing 1 for 14 from the 3. And there's going to be a million different things you can point to that will decide a basketball game. This is certainly one of them, but there are hundreds of others to go along with it.
Sure, and clearly a bigger problem for the Rockets than Scott Foster or any other official is Kevin Durant, who's averaged over 40 a game over the last 5. Does Houston feel like it has a plan B to deal with him?
You're right. He is making history. And, we've been lucky as basketball fans to see James Harden in his historic offensive season and then Kevin Durant and what he's doing over the last 4 games of the first round, averaging 41 points, shooting 57% from the field, 41% from 3. I mean, it's incredible. I think Houston defensively just has to rely on the switches to be physical and get a hand up before the shot's taken and make it difficult for him, trying to get open, and then on the catch just be there and be physical. And really the biggest thing for them is communication with that switching defense that they have. If they just have a few lapses here and there on the communication, Kevin Durant with his efficiency will take advantage of it, I would argue, every time, if not 99% of the time.
Ali LaForce working Game 2 tonight. Thank you much. Mind your landing zones and stay out of the officials' way.
You got it.
Meanwhile, the Warriors are focused on slowing down James Harden and the Rockets' offense. Count Kevin Durant as an admirer of the Beard's opportunistic approach.
I think both teams are going to try to play their best tonight, and I think the officials are going to try to ref the best game that they can ref. I mean, that's all we can ask for. There's a certain way that we tend to contest shots or, close out on shooters. So it's not just James, it's all their guys that we gotta have proper technique on and make sure we're out there on the catch and making them see a hand over, once they get up and shoot the ball. So, just having proper technique, I think, is the most important thing, no matter who's in front of you.
All right, we got to take advantage of the fact we have two coaches in the building here to discuss their favorite topic, referees, of course. And you guys know, I joked about it with Allie, but this is something that's been happening for a million years. Between games, the team that loses complains about the officials. Sometimes the coach takes a fine immediately after the game just to get it in everyone's head, plant the seeds about whatever it is you want to get done. But how will this affect Game 2 tonight? Because the referees know what's going on. They know what all the chatter has been over the last 48 hours.
Well, at the end of the day, it's not going to impact it that much. The officials that are on the game are going to come out and they're going to call the game the best they can. Regardless of what chatter there's been since the last game. Nobody's trying to sway these calls one way or the other. They're going to do the best job that they can, but it is part of the gamesmanship historically throughout the NBA playoffs for coaches to try to get every edge, every advantage that they can.
I think that this is a tremendous amount of pressure on the officials coming into the game. When you've been singled out the way, this wasn't just like a...
Well, particularly Scott Foster,
Yeah, this wasn't just like
not a general complaint.
This was like, this guy has hurt us in the past, and we just don't feel he should be on the game tonight. I don't know if I've ever heard it that direct and both.
He shouldn't be doing our games. That's what the Rockets said
So
back in February.
it puts a lot of pressure on him. And look, here's the one thing that what James Harden said that I agree with. A player, a coach, should be able to have dialogue during the course of a game with an official. I don't think there should be an official that gives you this, put their hand up in your face and don't want to hear anything. Come on, this is a very emotional game. There's a lot of pressure in these games. If you set yourself above this whole thing that you can't listen, as long as it's respectful. I'm not saying you should be out there using all kinds of language at the officials, but there's a way of handling a person when he's trying to get his point across, when he's in the middle of all this pressure and the tension that goes into these games. But to not listen, not have a dialogue with him, I think it's frustrating the players that much more and the coaches that much more because they can't get a word into you fearing that you're going to get hit with a technical. And It's not just the technical, it's money. It's the point that goes on the board that, to me, that mattered the most. Because at the end of the game, you lose a game by 1 or 2.
Sure.
Those technical, obviously, they matter.
Well, three-point shooting matters a lot to the Rockets as well. They started the game 1 of 14 in Game 1, and this goes back to last year's Western Conference Finals, remember, when they missed 27 in a row at one point. What else, aside from knocking down shots, needs to change for the Rockets tonight?
Look, I think the Rockets have a lot of confidence going into this game. I think they really feel that they can beat this team. They know that they're going to make their three-point shots eventually because that's part of who they are. That's their DNA, that you got to get out and guard them at the three-point line. And when James Harden gives the ball up to a teammate, he's relying on them to make shots. So if they had one bad game where it came out that way, they got it out of their system.
Yeah.
And now in their minds, I'm sure they think they're going to make them tonight.
Well, they're a team that could look like they did the other night where they're missing most of their threes, and they can come in and shoot 60% tonight.
Sure.
Blow the doors off of this Warriors team. They have that kind of firepower. There's going to be highs and lows, but they're capable.
And for the Warriors tonight, they're riding Kevin Durant offensively. I mentioned Allie, 40 points a game over his last 5. And a lot of drives in Game 1 as well. It's not just jump shooting for him. What can Houston do differently against him?
To me, the Dirk shot that Kevin Durant shoots at 7 foot, where he steps back and leans, I don't know if there's any answer to that. Single with single coverage. And the problem is with Steph and Clay running around out there, it's tough to bring double teams. But there are opportunities throughout the game, where there's you can push them to the baseline and bring low man help. We saw some good possessions that Houston had, doing that. And you just have to be as opportunistic as you can without giving up threes on the weak side.
Sometimes it's the team that they're playing that night. Do they have one guy or two guys that they can put up against him, like Horford did against Giannis the other night? Do you happen to have one of those guys? Well, not many teams have a guy that can match up against Kevin Durant, because what Golden State does immediately is they run something that forces a switch. He gets the guy on him that he wants, and then it's a matter of him just shooting over the top of that guy, whether he's down in that low post or close to being the low post area, in that elbow area, or backing down 1 or 2 dribbles like you said, I mean, he stole that from me. It was one of my favorite shots, my 1 foot fadeaway.
I was told that was Dirk Nowitzki. That's true.
No, I actually did. I'm
showed
much
Dirk.
older than Dirk. Okay. But what a tough shot. He took it at a critical time in the game. It was like nothing. He just stepped back and splashed it.
Now, the Rockets are now 1-9 all-time at Oracle in the postseason. Try to turn that around tonight and tie things up. Gordon Hayward and the Celtics getting set to try to take a 2-0 lead in Milwaukee tonight. We'll talk to Chris Webber on the other side as we continue here on Game Time.